So first of all, I'm going to say a big thank you for choosing us over the cost of living crisis that's happening right now. It's real. No, I'm joking. It's all recorded. You got it. Super Richard's talk. So I'm really, really proud to be here today as part of Dojo. I do represent the 30-odd of us in the Black experience community in Dojo FinTech. A lot of you might ask, what is FinTech? And just to give you a little bit of a bigger picture, we support over 100,000 business owners with their payment solution and technology, all the way from funding, integration, payments platforms, recently as well, restaurant management systems, bookings, so not just B2B, but B2B2C as well. And one of the reasons I'm really proud and excited of this discussion today is that every single one of us standing here have very different roles at Dojo in different tribes. And when we talk about career progression and opportunities, we've also all come from very different backgrounds. And we've also worked our way through very different squiggly careers throughout as well. So this is an opportunity to have this as a conversation, as a discussion. These guys are going to kind of take us through some of the things they love about their roles, but also how they got there in terms of career growth, progression, conversations. But also we'd love to open it up to you guys as well to take any questions in relation to our personal experiences as well in Dojo. So without me dilly-dallying, I am Lux. I am Sales Enablement Manager at Dojo, part of our commercial strategy team. I've been in business for 4 years now, and I started as a sales performance coach, but I studied product design, and I started by selling furniture. And 4 years later, I say as Sales Enablement Manager in Dojo. And one of the things I'd say I love about my job is that if there's any entrepreneurs in this room or non-entrepreneurs, one thing I would like to say, because you'll hear a lot of us talking about it, is that if you are an entrepreneur or you own a business in this room, you are a sales person. And I think there's a few of us here that started our career that way, but it's amazing to see where that can take you and kind of how that can evolve in corporate as well. So I'm going to get the guys to introduce themselves. I'm not going to steal your thunder. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Lux. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Pam Moore, and I am one of the senior people partners at Dojo. So I have the job of looking after corporate functions. So that is primarily the people team, the finance team, legal, risk, and the marketing team. I've been at Dojo for 12 months. This is actually the month that I started, so what a way to celebrate. And I think working for Dojo and being a people partner definitely speaks to some of my qualities. So I'm someone who very much values social interaction, helping people, and being in the people team as well speaks to my naturally inquisitive and nosy nature. I get to find out a lot of what is happening in the business first before everybody else. And I get to speak to a lot of people day to day, which I genuinely do love. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Pam. So I'm Damon, everyone, and I work in the finance team at Dojo here. I've been at Dojo for about 10 months now, so just under a year. And my role is pretty much just partnering with the business to make sure that we keep growing sustainably. I have to say that right because my manager's staring right at me, so I need to make sure that I get that on point. So I look at things like unit economics, looking at like our merchants, are they healthy? How can we grow faster? Looking at like opportunities for us to like penetrate the market. So fun stuff if you like that stuff, but for some of you it might be very boring. And what I love about the role is actually just seeing how the input that I have actually does contribute to the output. Like I can see also Pam's in the people, I'm in the numbers, so I can see everything, right? So I can see how the work I do contributes to the business growth and the opportunity. So it's such a great place to be in. I think my team's awesome. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Hi everyone, I'm McIntyre. I work as a product manager within the payment tribe. My role essentially ensures that our merchants or our customers get their money on time, they get paid in the right amount, at the right time, and in the right quantity. One of the things that is interesting about my role is I get to see the impact of the processes we handle, the acquiring process essentially, how it affects the businesses, in terms of how it helps them grow, how it helps them expand, how it helps them get a lot of insight about their business, and then ultimately how it helps them, increase their profit and their revenue. And I've been at Dojo for about 4 months, so I'm not as much of a furniture as much as these guys. But I started off as a startup founder. I tried to solve a problem in Nigeria, and I failed woefully. But definitely that was my path to this point where I learned about, building a business, understanding payments, understanding essential, in the essentials of payment within a business, and for a startup, for a small, medium-scale enterprise as well. And then, here we are.
Hi everyone, my name is Mofe. I work as a partner tech advocate at Dojo, and I've been at Dojo for 2 months shy of 2 years, so coming to my 2-year anniversary. Looking forward to the good swag. I said my role is a partner tech advocate. I can almost guarantee that nobody actually knows what that means. That's because it's not really a common role. I'm the only person in the company with the role. But essentially, my background is, I've come from a background of software engineering, and I moved into kind of this partner relations or external client relations. So I work a lot with the people who use a lot of our products and services from a technical standpoint. And part of the benefit of my role is that I get to work across all of the different product teams within the company and really diving down into the details, work on demos, actually contribute to the building of new APIs and coming up with fixes. So yeah, it's really cool. No 2 days are the same. Yeah, a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys. So as you can see, there's a wide variety in terms of the teams we work for, but almost even kind of very different specialities. And I think that's the beauty of Dojo in our community, is the fact that we do have representation across all of our tribes and teams. And I think that's a really important thing for the community as well in terms of that representation. So one of the themes today has been in and around being intentional with your moves in terms of career growth. So one of the questions I'd first like to ask Pam, especially from a people partner's perspective, is what are some of those very basics one can make, especially if they're a graduate coming out of careers, in planning for career progression and planning your career?
Thank you. Okay, that's a really, really good question. And I would definitely say the first one is know your why. What is it that you want to do? Where is it that you want to go? Give yourself something to kind of be fixated on. So to speak to my own career, when I left university, I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a job in the first year. I'm going to be high flying. I'm going to work at JP Morgan. I'm going to do all of these things. I worked in my retail job for about 2 years. And I was like, okay, this is a very humbling experience. Life did not go the way I thought it was going to go. And I had to be very intentional. I said, right, one of the things I really loved when I was at uni was the HR modules. And I said, okay, right, this is where I want to go. I'm now working as a sales associate in Selfridges. I loved my job, but I needed to make sure that I got to the next place. So then it was setting goals. So I said, right, I don't have any of those transferable skills. How do I get those transferable skills where I am? And how do I find people that are going to get me to where I need to go? So I was very clear with my manager in terms of, I love working here, but this ultimately isn't where I want to be forever. This is where I want to be. So once he had that information, he would open up opportunities for me to be able to get those skills that would ultimately get me into HR. So then I started doing things like a lot more administrative pieces, so that was transferable skills so that I can go into HR admin. And I said, right, with regards to where I want to work, I know for me, brand name is very important. So it was like, right, looking for jobs which had HR administrators or entry level and things like that. So I was very intentional. I knew I wanted to get into HR. What skills did I need to get there? So I knew my why, and I set my clear goals. And how I always view it is almost like when you're going on a road trip. You know, right, where am I going to? I'm driving to Westfield, for example. How do I get there? I need to go on the A40. I need to make sure that I've got petrol in my car, that I don't have any flat tyres, and so on and so forth. You wouldn't go to your destination without doing all of those checks. And it's the same thing with your career. You need to be very much, what do I want to do? If it's job title that's important to you, that's fine. If it's financial that's important to you, that's fine. But you need to make sure that you've got that clear path of how you're going to get there as well. And your goals will help you stay on track.
Absolutely. And I think there's a beauty in what you said there about feeling like I don't have those transferable skills, but being able to have those honest conversations with your direct line managers about, this is not my end goal, this is where I want to go. And I think sometimes we think maybe sharing that is almost maybe not wanting to share commitment in what you're currently doing, but people want to hire people that are ambitious, and they'll put you in the right places where you need to be in terms of the next project to kind of seek that opportunity, and you can learn those transferable skills. Absolutely.
Sorry, just to quickly add that, and before I say this, I promise this is not scripted, right? But like Pam said something, and I think it's so important to be able to have a manager that is like you're able to be honest with, because I think that's a sign of a really good manager, right? So if you want to be in HR in 3 years' time and you're not able to tell your manager that, they're probably not a good manager. And like I can say that because like I've had really good managers like over the years. So I think like if you don't have that person, finding someone who you can be fully transparent with, and someone who's probably a bit more senior than you who can help you get to where you need to be is a really good sign.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's not your direct line manager and not in your direct team, or they might be a manager that's external into a different business, and that's why I think the beauty of these events as well in networking are massive in terms of those connections. So, nicely after Damola, I wanted to ask you, obviously you started in sales, and I'll go into it, and you're now in finance strategy. How did that journey come about?
Yeah, this is a very interesting journey that I've had. So yeah, started in sales, but I think just before I say it, I think I've always had an ethos that, I mean, I don't know, 21, graduated from uni. It's like I have no idea on earth what I want to do. Like I'm 26 and I still don't know like what I want to do, right? But I think I always have an ethos where it's, if you don't know what you want to do, just try a bunch of things, because ultimately what you do is trying things, you'll know what you like or you don't like, and knowing what you don't like is almost as good as knowing what you do like, right? So I was like, okay, graduated from uni, I'd done a summer intern at Google. They were like, hey, come back, and I was like, of course. Like, so moved to Dublin for a bit and was in sales for about just under 2 years. And I think sales is a very challenging place to be. I think it's great because you learn so many good things, right? Like you learn how to speak to people, you learn how to solve a problem that businesses need. So I learned a really, really great deal, but it got to a point where I was like, this isn't like what I want to do. Like I majored in economics, like I always had an interest in numbers, wanted to be around the data. So I was like, yeah, like I'm gonna just make the switch. And most people would probably pay like lots of money for a really good course, which is some are really, really good out there. But I went on Udemy, typed in how to be good at SQL. I bought a course for £17 and my next job was in the strategy team where SQL was like a prerequisite. So I think it goes to show like Udemy and like these things like Coursera aren't actually like bad. Like they're actually really good. And that was ultimately like the switch that helped me to jump from a sales role, which not many people do. Like it's hard to go from being someone who's customer facing to being behind the scene in the numbers, doing the day-to-day work, making sure that the business is running as it should be. But I think that course really did set me up for a good like pathway to being where I am today. And every job, well, most jobs that I've applied for in the past, SQL has been a prerequisite, right? So I think it's about like understanding like, if you do want to move into a new role, like my brother, he studied medicine, but he's not a practicing doctor. Like he works at a startup, right? And it's like, it's able to make these transitions, but all you need to do is find out like what is important for where you want to be. Like find one or two things that are really, like go on ChatGPT, ask them, hey, this is the job spec, what do I need to know? And then just try and buy a course, and then that I think should help you get to where you want to be.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned there, one of the key things, especially with data, fintech, finance, I think the market is so forever evolving. I think the more of your own research you can do in terms of understanding what that industry is trying to solve for at the moment, the more you can really kind of cherry pick and nitpick, especially when you're not sure on what to do. Let the market tell you what's needed in the market to guide you in that direction. So that's great advice. Thanks, Damola. So, Akintaya, one question I had for you, which sometimes we spoke about, how you've gone into a distant industry and coming out of sales or deciding what I want to do, but there's a very tricky decision-making time that happens in career progression, which is sometimes the opportunity for growth and development comes potentially at the cost of less pay and compensation, less salary. So what would you say is the best thing to do when you're trying to make that choice between career progression within where you are, but again, not more salary, and actually deciding, I'm going to completely change industry. I'm going to agree to go into an entry level, but actually I've got something that allows me to grow more. How do you make that call? And in your experience, how have you made that call in those moments?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the cliche thing would be to say, go get experience, right? But that might not be always true. Sometimes for a vertical move, you might need to make an horizontal move first, right? So it depends on where you are, your situation, the role, the level of your career. Are you at entry level? Are you at the mid level? Are you at the senior level? Now, what do you need at that point? No, one of the things that I think for us young people, we need to get a hold of more is clarification. Now, clarity of what you want to achieve. Like speaking from what Damla said, you need to clearly know what your next goals are. Now, if your next goals are, for example, you want to get an MBA in the next 2-3 years, you might need the cash to be able to sponsor that. That might, motivate you to get a job that would pay you well enough to go get that degree. But if you're looking at a very high-skilled role and you need some level of experience to get that done, then you might need to maybe even take a more junior role to learn the work, grind out results on the job, and then gather the knowledge you need for the next role. So I think it purely depends on where you are, but most importantly, we need to be able to have clarity of thought of what you intend to do next, and also have short-term goals. It's good to have long-term goals, ambitious goals, but I think one of the cool things that I've learned to do over time is understand tactical approach to things. There's a vision, there's an objective, but what are the tactics that gets me results in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months? Because the more you're able to churn out result quickly, the more you get to achieve or get the experience that you need to get done. Now, you could stay on the long-term objective for months or years. It might not get you as quick to the level of skill you want to attain. So back to what I started with, it depends on where you want to be or the clarity of thought about your next move as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting what you said about those short-term and long-terms. I think sometimes it's also that financial planning. I think we've mentioned it in these rooms before, kind of having that network around you. So if you have a partner and you know that for 6 months you can take that step back in salary, but you've planned financially where you've got a year's target in terms of also asking those questions in those interviews, what's the earning potential 2 years in if successful in those roles, allows you to kind of make those choices with less risk as well and just more drive in terms of knowing what your why is as well. Thank you. Well, fair. You've had a few different experiences, I think, in your career. What advice would you give somebody? A lot of the times we kind of progress inwards in the loyalty in terms of like the business that we work for. But when you're trying to take the plunge and actually apply for a role externally and make that move, what's been your experience?
Yeah, thank you. So just a bit of background into me. Before Dojo, and coming straight out of uni, I'll probably say in contrast to these guys, I kind of always knew I just wanted to be in tech. So I studied computer and business studies at university, and then I did an internship at IBM, and then did a grad job there, and then moved into a startup where I was the 21st employee, and I was there for about 2 years, and then I ended up in Dojo. And I can say at each point in time, I think there was definitely kind of a difference I was looking for, or a change, maybe in culture or what I was ready to achieve at this certain period of time. So while I was at IBM, first of all, that was just a great, massive company where there was over like 300,000 people. So as you can imagine, you're working on a very, very small piece of the puzzle. There's loads of red tape. It takes months and months for any kind of major decisions to be made. And that was a really good environment to kind of begin my career because it was a very safe environment where I could be curious, but I also had the freedom to learn at a very comfortable pace. And then kind of just going back to the question in terms of looking at kind of an external move, I know I didn't want to be too comfortable. It was a very comfortable place. I could have stayed there very comfortably. But I thought that if I was going to accelerate my career and learn as much, it would be good to kind of move into a startup. Little did I know I was setting myself up for a lot of work. And yeah, so long story short, moved to Yapily, which was an open banking startup where I was a 21st employee. And that was really challenging. And I can remember around the time of applying, it was also trying to find kind of where do I fit in the market, understanding kind of, what roles could potentially work. And actually, before I landed the job at Yapily, I actually tried to kind of just apply to a load of different places just to see what would stick. So not even places I necessarily thought I was going to get, but places I just thought, let me just see. Let's see how far in the interview process I can go. And what was really useful was just kind of like receiving the feedback, even when you didn't make it far in the process. There was even a job I actually got to the end, and then it was conversation with my manager at my current role where he was just like, you want to be careful. And I think it just feeds back to what these guys are saying in terms of having kind of goals around, where do you want to be and kind of what kind of way your career will be shaped by the places that you're actually in. Looking back now reflectively, I could probably say that picking a company is really important, especially for things like culture And even though for me, I always joke about my role, being a partner tech advocate and not knowing what that means, it's actually important because when you're thinking about your next move, a lot of the roles you'll see will be very similar to the role that you have, because that's what recruiters will see. Also in terms of like years of experience as well, you want to think about all of these different things. So whereas on paper, a role may not seem very, I know my role doesn't mean kind of much in terms of what I do in terms of a day-to-day basis, but thinking in terms of my next move, that role does become somewhat important. So yeah, these are the things I've kind of seen. And then the last thing I'll probably say, also in interview processes, it's also really good to ask a lot of questions. One thing I learned as well was that as much as, when you go to an interview, you're thinking in your head, oh, I want to be the right person for this role. I want them to love me. It's also the other way around. Like, you need to make sure that this is the right place for you. So I think one thing I've learned is just to be very honest, very open, even in the interview process. Don't be afraid or shy of, asking those hard questions. Like, I remember when I interviewed for this role, I was like, oh, what does progression look like? What does, am I coming into a team of other people in my role? Am I going to be the only person? Having been in Yapily and being the only person in my role, I knew what that meant. And so all of these questions were really good to kind of clarify ahead of going into the role. And yeah, so I'll just say, yeah, just being really honest in the interview process, really getting an understanding of what the culture looks like. And yeah, as these guys have said, kind of having your goal in terms of what you're actually trying to get out of your next move. Yeah.
Thank you. We spoke a lot about goal setting as well and kind of being honest in interviews. And I think one of the things you mentioned was when you're being honest and asking those questions in the role that I'm going into, I think sometimes we think a lot about the end goal, but a lot of you in this room have also shared it's the journey that you've got to enjoy. So I think one of the things that I think is key, vital in those interviews is to ask what the day-to-day looks like. Because I think if you're not going to enjoy that day-to-day, it doesn't matter, no title. That is not what you're going to be driven to put your passion and soul in. So I think a lot of the time, even with the fancy titles and what do they mean, that's what you want to get down to the bottom of, or people that you aspire to be in roles of, always have those conversations with them and ask them, what is your actual day-to-day? Is that something I could see myself doing and enjoying the journey for?
Yes, just to add on to that, sorry, Lux, I remember one of the points I was thinking of, I actually reached, in fact, funny enough, while in my last roles, I think I had people always reach out to me to ask, oh, what was it like in this role? And I was like, oh yeah, it's great. I do this, I do that, and do that. And I thought, actually, that's a really good point. Why don't I reach out to people on LinkedIn who are already in the company, maybe not in the role, but already in the company, just to see what, life is like on a day-to-day basis. That's definitely something I'd recommend doing. It's funny, I can actually see someone I've actually, I know she knows them herself, but I've seen someone I've actually reached out, well, they've reached out to me and we've had like conversations around what it's like at Dojo. And it's definitely a great tactic to get insider knowledge before you even before you apply, just to think, is this somewhere I want to be? But yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. So there's been a lot of conversations around for career growth and progression, really having those mentor figures in your day-to-day, whether it's from management and outwardly. What would you say for those that are not, I would say, the most versed at like networking and putting themselves out there in terms of building those allies and relationships? What advice would you give in around that?
I would definitely say if you are an introvert where networking, you literally just shudder at the thought of having to talk to people, there are kind of ways to navigate it. I would definitely say your university, college, secondary school alumni is a massive place and probably the first place that you should look. You know those people there and they are always willing to kind of reach out to people who were old students and give advice. So that's definitely one place that I would start. And then I'd also look for maybe professional not companies, I'm trying to think, networking spaces. So for example, Black Women in HR is a space that I kind of have the newsletter. If there are conferences, I might go to them as well. And again, it's just about being in a space with people who have similar interests as you as well. So it isn't as daunting. So start small And then once you're kind of comfortable with that, you can kind of get bigger. And then as well, sometimes, like one thing that I used to do is when I listen to a podcast, I might follow an Instagram, and sometimes there might be like a conversation within a thread. You can start a conversation there and take it into someone's DMs and keep continuously talking about it, add each other on LinkedIn. And even when you go to these conferences as well, whoever you're speaking to, it might be, oh, do you mind if I just take your LinkedIn? And you might even just start a conversation in a DM, for example. I had someone reach out to me and said, oh, I met you the other day. It was really nice to meet you. I've seen there's a role here. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. More than happy to jump on a Zoom and tell you a bit about that. So you can kind of start where you feel comfortable. There is a networking opportunity in everything, and just start where you feel comfortable and then kind of progressively get bigger. But also with the mentoring piece, I want to say that it's a two-way relationship. So as much as you're getting out from somebody else, also think about what value that you can add there. And then also when the time is right, pay it forward. And that's something that I'm very, very big on. Like, I've been very blessed in my career to have met some amazing people, and I've always wanted to pass on knowledge that I've received from others, because that's the way it continues as well. So yeah.
So just to quickly add, like, I think it's a really, really good point Pam made. And it's that, like, I think sometimes people are afraid that people don't want to help, but 9 times out of 10, everyone is actually just like wanting to help you, right? So it's like, I think sometimes it's almost like reframing our thinking to be like, actually, you probably do want to help, and I'm only the blocker. So like, why don't I just? Because ultimately, everyone is doing the same thing. Like, everyone's been at the same place before at the same time, and it's like, wow, like, if only someone had told me, right? So I think just believe that like people are going to help. But yeah, I think it's a really good point.
Absolutely. And again, the whole mentoring and networking, as I said, it doesn't have to be within your immediate network, but the more you put yourself out there at events like this, you're going to an event like this, whether it's you're going with a colleague or you go with somebody that's a support of you outside of your career fest, it's like the little things that create that comfort bubble where you're still putting yourself out of your comfort zone, because ultimately it's about visibility as well. And I think one of the things that I speak a lot about in the community is people don't know you're there and who you are and what value you bring to the table unless you kind of make yourself known and make yourself shown. And I think it's one of those skills of putting yourself out of your comfort zone that's really needed in terms of that career growth and progression. Absolutely. So in terms of decisive moments, I would say, in terms of your career, like if you think of, especially go from sales to commercial strategy in finance, what would you say was a turning point in your career that you thought, a moment that kind of marked a change in terms of that growth progression?
Yeah, this is actually a pretty easy one. I remember end of 2021, peak of COVID. I was at Google for almost 2 years, and I was like, I've had enough. I was just like, I've had enough. I think it was a great place. Like, Google's a fantastic place, but I think I knew what I wanted, and I knew that the motivations for me staying in the role at the time was just like they were the wrong motives. So I was like, I'm gonna up and leave. Like, this is in the height of a pandemic, cost of living is happening. I have no other job lined up, and I'm just gonna, like, at the time, I just felt a really like strong conviction, like, and a leading, and it was definitely driven by my faith and stuff. So I was like, you know what, can you take the leap of faith? Left Google, and I was like, okay. I was getting married like the next year, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, my wife is gonna kill me. So done that, but like, I think that for me was like the inflection point, because I think it made me realize that I was actually serious about where I wanted to go, and it made me realize that if I'm willing to leave a role that is paying me pretty well, it's making me stable, but I know that I'm not happy in this role. I think I was like, okay, like I know I'm serious. Like, I know what I want to go into. Now, I don't recommend that for everyone. Like, please, I'm not saying that. But I think for me at the time, I knew that this was the right thing for me to do. And I say it's the inflection point because when I left Google to join Hopin, which I think BYP used to host their conferences on Hopin, it was like a virtual events platform. It was a point for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because Google and Hopin, Google was 100,000 people, Hopin was 1,000 people. Google was very, very structured. Hopin, I had no idea what I was doing. Google was, for one, in the office. Hopin was fully remote. Like there were so many contrasts between the two roles, and I think like that was probably the biggest turning point for me, because the skills that I learned there are things that I do in my day-to-day now, things that I'm gonna do in the future roles to come. I think one of them that I mentioned already, SQL for a data person is the most important skill. Being able to solve like ambiguous problems. Like, Dojo is a place where there are many, many, many ambiguous problems, right? exec like management. Like there are so many things that transition between Google and Hopin gave me that actually made me like really fortunate and blessed to be in the position that I am today. So yeah, I'd probably say that's like my biggest turning point.
Absolutely, and I'd say to add to that, I think we talk about many ambitious problems, but I think the culture of like failing forwards as well is like really recommended where we work, in terms of just feeling like there's a problem to solve and you can be creative about how to solve it, and not having that analysis paralysis, but just going with it. Because I think, again, there's this kind of fear of making a mistake or a false turn, when actually I think what we praise the most is people that drive action and change, so kind of thinking outside the box to find a solution, really. So very results orientated for sure. So managing upwards and progressing vertically. So obviously we're talking about leadership in this event, and we know that's something that we want to see a lot more of in terms of representation, I think, community in those leadership roles. What would you advise in terms of somebody that's trying to move vertically, and we say vertically as in progress upwards in the business?
Yeah, I think I'll start by talking about my experience. Let me go back a bit. I mentioned earlier that I founded a startup in Nigeria. I used to live in Nigeria, where a lot of things are different, from what we have here. But some things are quite interesting, which is the industry called payment and fintech. A lot of things are happening, startups are flying up here and there. So I also took the initiative with a couple of friends, and then we did something. And then we failed woefully, like I said. But those experiences put us out there. We were able to meet a lot of people, develop networks, grow a lot of relationships. I knew practically all the bank, who is who in the country and some parts of Africa. But at that point, when we failed and we decided to shut down, it felt like, what have we done? The years had gone by, we had not really made much progress. You don't have money in your bank account, because the startup, and then you're thinking of what to do next. Now, in product management, usually there's this saying that I like to go with, which is one of the most important things is momentum. Now, in your job or in the career, it might not be the same thing. Now, there's sometimes that the phases where you have where is either you're looking to get a job or you feel you're stagnant on a certain level and you want to move up. I would say that from my experience, the rule is never let a crisis go to waste. Now, see that as a point where you need to use every single experience that you've learned to be able to make the next step. Now, I would say the first thing you should do in a typical working environment is ask for a promotion, right? Talk to your manager and say, okay, this is my plan. This is what I want to do. In the instance where that is not working, then focus on the things that you can get done for yourself. For example, there are definitely low-hanging fruits that you can work towards to be able to achieve some level of result, because ultimately that's what the market, the other organizations, your company speaks or responds to. How much of results have you gotten? How have you moved the needle, in whatever way for the organization? And if you're looking to move up or through another organization, you need to be able to show up and say that, okay, you know what, this is how I'm going to add value to your business. This is how I'm going to add value to your customers. And ultimately, the focus should be on what can you get done in the time frame you have, where you are, what are you currently doing, how much of effort are you putting into the work that's required of you. Then another important thing is to understand the objectives of the team itself, specifically from your manager or from the leaders in the organization. What exactly translates to you getting result? It's not just a set of activities that you think you're busy with, but specifically, what are the things that actually mean that you should get results? Sometimes it could be relationship building. Sometimes it's a specific product outcome. You need to be very critical about what those things mean. And then, of course, ultimately, as you go through your daily life as a part of the organization, you want to listen as much as possible. You want to understand what the business is doing, what direction business is going, what are the plans for the future, and then articulate how to contribute, immensely to that. And of course, you could then decide that, okay, you want to change careers or change jobs. You need to then start preparing for that as well. And like I said, never let a crisis go to waste. Take everything you've learned in that phase. There's some things that seem very minute, maybe not as important, or you felt, tasks that you didn't even like to do. but ultimately they count in terms of the skills that you've been equipped with for the next step that you're going to take.
I love that. Never let a crisis go to waste. And I think the greatest leaders have come out of crises because actually somebody put their hand up and said, maybe I can fix this. And a lot of times I think we kind of sit in those chairs thinking, oh, I could do this a little bit better, I think. It looks like they don't know what. And I think we need to like speak up in those situations and really kind of speak up about how we can solutionize and problem solve. And I think that's a massive way of moving upwards. Absolutely. So I'm going to open it up to the audience because, as I said, these guys, thank you so much. They've all shared some brilliant insights in terms of the stories they've had through careers. So give it up for them. I'm going to open it up to the audience now in relation to any questions that you might have for any of us, really, in relation to career growth, progression, or anything else that sparked to mind as you listen to their stories. Yeah, we've got one over there. Shall I give my microphone?
This is for you, actually, I believe. You mentioned mentorship and how it's a two-way street. And as somebody who just got a mentor, I was curious, how can I get back during the mentorship relationship, make it a two-way street?
Okay, hi. So we recently in Dojo actually launched a mentoring program, and I think one of the things that we initially did in the business was actually try and pair up people that were looking to progress career-wise in certain ambits, but finding the right fits. Because I think with mentoring, it's very different from coaching as into your direct manager. I think it's about finding somebody with whom you feel psychologically safe, but also you're seeking mentoring. Why are you seeking mentoring? Are you seeking mentoring because you're trying to learn more about an industry and ambit that they work in? So that's the right mentor, because the conversations and the advice they can give to you is related to the topic that you're trying to build into, or the skill sets that you're trying to grow into. You might be seeking mentorship for something completely different, like navigating team relationships and networking. So I think one thing that's super important, I think, for businesses to do is to actually be able to map in the business who are those champions in terms of those skills and what they are great at, whether that is networking and managing upwards, or whether that is team facilitation or public speaking. And it's understanding, what do you want to get out of the mentoring? So as opposed to seek in your company, oh, you know, is there a mentoring program? I'd love to have a mentor. Actually find out first, what is it do you want mentoring for? Find out who in the business speaks to you and motivates you, who in the business you look up to, and actually reach out to those leaders, because actually as part of their own development, they should be doing that mentoring. And I think they'll be more than glad that you've reached out to them for that mentoring that was outside of what's prescribed really in a program as such. I'd say the best mentoring comes from that. And then just being really clear of what you want to get out of that mentoring relationship, because I think sometimes we find ourselves as a career growth conversation. It's about managing relationships. That's what I would advise. I'd always seek to the people that you look up to ask them to spend time with you. Another thing as well about mentoring, I think sometimes when you seek that relationship, again, what you said earlier is like thinking people are not necessarily willing to help, but actually you've got to realize it's a two-way street. The mentee and the mentor are both growing by going through that relationship, that conversation. So you're offering them just as much as an opportunity that you're getting from them as well in terms of growth. So that's... Thank you. Welcome. Any other?
Awesome. Hello, thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time and your insights. I have sort of a counterintuitive question, because I know this is a conversation around professional growth and sort of planning forward. And I wonder, though, sort of any of your takes on, you know, when do you get contentment or find sort of growth in pausing it and sort of reflecting on what you have already and in enjoying it? I think there's a generational shift, I think, that's happening in the workplace, where a lot of people are recognizing that actually I don't necessarily want to get to the top. I'm happy where I'm at, or I value so many things outside of work. And so, you know, oftentimes when you have those vulnerable and honest conversations with your management, are you actually able to say, look, I don't know that I want this promotion, or I don't actually think that I want to get there? And so where's your sort of insight or perspective on finding professional growth in actually recognizing that your growth can come from other areas of your life outside of your career?
I really love that question, and it's actually a situation that I found myself in this week, I would say. And I would definitely say, like I said earlier, I've been blessed that I've worked at quite a few different companies. And in moving from different companies, I very much found out very quickly what I liked, what I didn't like, where I can thrive, what it is I want to do. So like Akintayo said, never let a crisis go to waste. Taking little bits from everywhere that you've been and just molding it and being able to say, right, Pamela likes being able to have flexible hours at work, be able to work from home X amount of days a week, have a team which are like this. So really making sure that you're taking stock of where you are and how that can help you. And I think, again, and I'll say this, I'm very blessed at where I am at Dojo, and this isn't just a PR piece, because I've come into an organisation which values culture, and for me, I learned very early on that culture is something that is very, very important to me. And then again, in finding a manager and someone that I can learn from and just having mentors within that business. And I'm very privileged to work with some fantastic leaders at Dojo. And I think for me, it very much, if I stayed at Dojo and I stayed in my role, I would be very happy, because it ticks all of those boxes that along the way I found were important to me, and that was enough. And anything else extra that came was an extra blessing. And again, I'll be very transparent. Like, I was talking to my manager the other day, and I mean, we're talking about something. I was like, oh no, I don't think I can do this. No, I can't. And it's like, actually, you're at a place where you wouldn't think about doing it anywhere else. So why not do it here? And actually, you can do it, but you get those moments of, can I? That imposter syndrome where it's like, who are you? You can't do that. Stop lying to yourself. And it's actually when you reflect on your strengths, and again, know who you are as a person, know your strengths, know your weaknesses. Don't forget about your blind spot. Know where you can become better, but then also speak to your strengths and say to yourself, yeah, actually, do you know what? I can do this. I will. And so I say all of that to say is just take stock wherever you are, whatever you're doing, to learn about yourself. And I think that is the most important thing. And then you can say, actually, do you know what? This speaks to me. I'm happy here. I'm happy with what I'm doing. Or, yeah, I'm going to do a U-turn. I'm leaving and I'm going to find something else. But you can only do that once you know yourself.
Yeah, just take a cue from what she mentioned. I have a personal experience. For example, before I joined Dojo, I used to work with an American company. And when I moved to the UK with my family, I decided that it was not a payment-focused company. It was a retail organization. And I felt, okay, I wanted something else. I wanted to come back into payment because I had a background with that. Now, I had to say, okay, I was going to stop working for a few months and just look for something that really suits me. I think I was being paid more, but my manager is here, so I won't go into that. But so what I'm trying to say is back to the earlier conversation about clarity about what you really want, and also where you are at that point in time. You probably would not advise someone just starting out his career, has bills to pay, to say, oh, just pause your career. I mean, your bank is going to come calling at some point, right? So you want to carefully take a stock, like she mentioned, where are you at this point in your career? And also it helps, that thought process helps to probably, for people that are much earlier in the career or thinking about doing something like that in the future, plan better for the future. So you want to get to a point, I think we were having a conversation in the office sometime, and I was saying, you know what, you need to get to a point where you shouldn't be scared to walk away. Yeah. You need to get to that point, especially as a black person. You need to be able to have a level of skill, or not just skill, but a level of confidence in where you are in life, what you want to do. And then if things take a turn that, you're not comfortable with, you take a walk. And then, but you need to plan for that. You can't just do that spontaneously unless, you're not going to like it.
Thank you, guys. So I've been told time is up, although I feel like there's loads of more juicy questions to come. So, guys, we're going to be here. We're going to be here at the after party. Please, if you want to ask us more questions, continue these conversations. We have shared as well. We've got loads of insane opportunities with Dojo as well, which go very fast. I remember asking Pam what vacancies we have right now. It's like, not the same ones we had last week. But please have a look. We shared it. Come and talk to us as well. I just wanted to say a massive thank you for these guys for joining us today, and also BYP for having us as well. Thank you.